Okay, welcome to our latest live stream, guys. Today I'll be explaining you about how we are going to do the dry motoring of an A320 equipped with CFM 56B engine. Right, so basically CFM can be powered using V2500 engines as well. So today we'll be discussing how we are going to dry motor the CFM 56 5B engine, right? So now we are at BIA or Bandar International Airport at Charlie Bay. So the aircraft is prepped for the dry motoring part. You can see that we have our APU available, so we'll be informing the ground crew that the aircraft is not that safe to approach by switching on the beacon light, and you can see that APU is selected on, and we have already taken APU bleed. So to start our dry motoring process, so before we start the process, it's better that if we get to know why we have to do the dry motoring and what is dry motoring. Basically, the dry motoring check means that operating the engine without fuel and ignition. So we all know that when you start the engine normally, you will have fuel coming into the engine, and then you will have the ignition happening, and then you will have the engine startup. But today we are discussing how to do the dry motoring check, and in this case, when we motor the aircraft, we will not have fuel and ignition happening, right? So why you need this is, it is necessary after certain inspections or maintenance, right? So sometimes we need to do the dry motoring after certain inspections and after doing some maintenance on the aircraft or the engine. So the dry motoring check will make sure that the engine turns freely and the related instruments operate correctly. And another important thing is that it also ensures that the operation of the starter and the starter air valve is correct, right? Additionally, a dry motoring cycle will also pressurize the fuel and lubrication system, which can be checked for leaks. So by doing the dry motoring part, we can also check whether we have positive fuel flow to the engine, and also ensure whether our lubrication system is working properly. And there's another thing, the dry motoring check is also used to cool down the engine prior to getting access for certain inspections. For an example, if we need to do a borescope inspection, which we use to check the inside of the engine or the core of the engine, sometimes we need to cool the engine as soon as possible. So in this case, to cool the engine, we use the dry motoring method, right? So if we list down the reasons why we need to dry motor, so number one is to verify the engine turns freely. Number two, to indicate the instruments operate correctly. Number three, verify proper starter operation. And number four, pressurize the fuel and oil system for leak checks. And number five, clear residual fuel from the combustion chamber. So this let me explain a bit. So if you have some amount of fuel left in the combustion chamber, during the next engine start, you can have some what you call this flame coming out from the exhaust. To get rid of this, you can do the dry motoring of the engine. So in this case, when you dry motor, you will not have what you call fuel and ignition happening, so that residual fuel which is inside the combustion chamber will be blown out through the exhaust. And the last one will be to cool the engine for borescope inspection. So basically those are the reasons which we require to do the dry motoring scenario. Okay, right. So where we need to look for when we are doing the dry motoring? So I told you that it's related to engine, so obviously you need to have a look at this panel, engine startup panel. Next you need to look into these two, engine warning display and SD, right? So after that I told you that we are not doing an automatic start, we are doing a dry motoring, so this is going to be a manual start. So then also you need to know where the manual start push buttons are. Those push buttons you will find here. So here you will have the manual start push button. If you have a closer look, you can see that here engine you have manual start for number 1 and number 2. So those three places would be basically the main areas which you need to look into when you do the dry motoring. Apart from that, so you need to pull a certain circuit breaker, which is a if it is a what you call number 1 engine, it will be 1 kc1, and for number 2 engine it will be 1 kc2. Let me check, as I can remember, it should be 1 kc2. Yes, if it is a number 1 engine, you will have to pull 1 kc1 circuit breaker, which you will find somewhere. This is your K, no, somewhere here, right? If we have a look, so 1 kc1, right? So it will be somewhere here, right? So that part we are not going to cover, so you need to pull that circuit breaker, right? Okay, so first I'll explain you the procedure, then we'll go through the procedure, and we'll go through the process, right? First we'll be switching on our fuel pumps. Fuel pumps you will find in the overhead panel. Currently all are set to switched off, right? Next we'll be opening that 1 kc1 or 1 kc2 for number 2 circuit breaker. That is to ensure that LP valve is open. So what will happen when the LP valve is open, the fuel system, the engine fuel system is lubricated by fuel itself. So by opening the LP valve, the aircraft fuel system will allow fuel to come into the engine and lubricate the pumps, fuel pumps. So we will not be supplying fuel to the combustion chamber, but because the engine is motoring or engine is turning, the fuel pumps will be running. So prevent the dry running condition of the fuel pump, will be opening the low pressure valve, so allowing aircraft fuel from the fuel tanks to come to the engine through the piping, right? And the next thing we have to ensure is that our thrust levers are at idle, so it is at idle, right? So the next thing is we will be starting the process. So we will have to put this engine mode selector to crank. So you can see that it has 3 positions. Here it is crank, here it is normal mode, and here it is the ignition start. For starting the engine in normal condition, we put it to here, but in this case we will be putting the mode selector to crank, right? So next then we will be pressing the relevant manual start push button. If we are going to start the number 1 or the drive motor number 1, we will be pressing this one. If we are going to drive motor number 2, we will be pressing this one, right? And that would be the controls that we will have to interact when we are doing the drive motoring process. So what to look for when you are doing the drive motoring, right? So when the engine starts to motor, we will have to check that the engine operates. So how you ensure this is by you check for the N2 speed, that is the your HP spool's speed, and you have to check whether engine oil pressure is increasing. The maximum time we can do the drive motoring part would be 120 seconds. So that is 2 minutes. So further than that you can't let the starter run. So you can do that, but for sometimes the starter can run for 5 minutes at a stretch, then you will have to let the starter cool down for about 30 minutes. So normal cycle would be 2 minutes on, 30 seconds off, 2 minutes on, so and so. So what, stick to your manuals, right? And so when the engine starts to rotate, you will see that the start air valve will be opening. So you will see all these indications here. You will see the start air valve opening here, right? So next then after we motor the engine for few less than 2 minutes, we can stop the process using the same push button which we pushed to start the process, right? So it would be here. Next you will see the start air valve closing and engine spooling off, so spooling down, and then you set your mode selector to normal, and you switch off the pumps, and if you don't require APU, you can select the bleed off, and finally you can close the circuit breaker, which means you can normalize the circuit breaker, right? So now we'll do this drive motoring part, and you will understand what the process is, and so it's not a very big deal, but something that you should know if you are a maintenance guy, or sometimes if you are a pilot as well. You need to do this process in case if you have a tailpipe fire during the shutdown or next startup cycle. So you have to do the drive motoring to ensure that you blow off the fire and all that, right? So without further ado, we'll get to this drive motoring process, right? Okay, first I told you that we will need our APU bleed. So we have APU bleed. Next step is to switch on the aircraft pumps. So fuel pumps we are selecting on. In this case you will not need the center pumps, so if you want you can select. So why we do this? That is to ensure that aircraft fuel system is functioning, and we have fuel to engine fuel pump for lubrication purposes when we open the 1 kc1 circuit breaker. So now I assume that I have already opened the 1 kc1 circuit breaker, which ensures LP valve remains open, right? So that is done. Our next is to ensure our thrust lever angle is at 0, right? It's at idle. Okay, next is the part where we have to set our mode selector to crank. So we'll be setting this to crank, and you will see these indications appearing. Now you see amber crosses, but as soon as we place this to crank, you will see the digits, the related indications coming on the upper or the EWD. So how that happens is, when you set this to crank, you will, the ECU will be powered, and it will give you indications here, right? So now I am going to place the mode selector to crank, and you will see indications coming, right? Now you can see the indications here. So in this case, during our drive motoring part, you will have to look for start air valve position, bleed air pressure, and the oil pressure. So you need to see a positive oil pressure here, which means that this should increase. So it will not go to green band, but you will see a increase here, and N2 indication will also come up here, right? So on here you can see, as I remember, it's on the ash background. You will see the indication here. Okay, now we have APU bleed, we have set the beacon, we have selected the fuel pumps on, we have set the mode selector to crank. So next thing would be to set the manual push button to on, and same time I told you that the maximum duration which you can motor the engine would be 2 minutes. So how to ensure that you don't go beyond 2 minutes is by using the chrono. So you can see here the chrono. When you press this, you will see a time or the stopwatch appearing on the ND. So by using that, you can see the time, and you can ensure that you don't go beyond 120 seconds or 2 minutes. So as soon as the start valve opens, I'll set the chrono to on, and we'll wait for some time, obviously less than 2 minutes, and then we'll shut down or stop the process using the same push button, right? So we have bleed, we'll be cranking, and we are going to lift the guard here, and when I press this, I'll be motoring engine number 1. Okay, and you will see blue on indication here, or the cyan on indication here. Cyan means it is a temporary activated system, right? Okay, here, and at the moment you have air conditioning packs working, but as soon as you select the manual start on, your air conditioning packs will close, right? Now it should already close, because when you set it to the crank, right, it should be off, right? Okay, I'm going to start it, and watch for start valve to open, and press the time, get the chrono, start to calculate. You have the start valve open, and you can see N2 increasing, and you can see oil pressure rising, right? You can see N2 increasing. So this will stabilize somewhere around 23%, and you can see we have oil pressure increment, and we'll let the engine drive motor, and if you have a look, you will see the engine motoring, right? So now it's already 35 seconds. We'll wait for about 1 minute, and we'll stop the process. Yeah, 45 seconds, right? So you still have this, and you can see that you will not have fuel flow, you will not have ignition. Here you will not have fuel flow, you will not have ignition, you will not have N1, because now only the HP rotor is turning. Right now we have already passed this thing. Now we are going to stop the start, right, and you can see start valve closed, N2 spooling down, oil pressure decreasing, right, and this will go to 0 gradually. And basically that is how you do the dry motoring of the CFM56 engine equipped A320 aircraft. So now you can see it's at 0, everything is 0, start valve close. Now you can put the mode selector to normal, right, and then you can switch off the pumps and you can normalize the 1 kc1 in this case, because we use the number 1 engine to motor, right. So you can reset the chrono, and if you want you can keep the APU running and bleed available, or otherwise you can shut down the APU. So basically guys, that is how you do the dry motoring of the engine. I told you why you need to dry motor the engine, and so next time we will discuss how to do the wet motoring of the engine. So in this channel we are basically trying to give you some in-depth knowledge about A320 aircraft systems. So in future I'll be covering A330 aircrafts as well, because for the moment I was not able to find any detailed or study level simulation A330 aircraft, but here this 320 is a Phoenix 320. This is pretty much the real deal. So we'll be basically covering the 320 systems through our video series, and if you need to know any information, and if you have any comments to share, please do share those with us. You can use the comment section, and thank you very much for watching this video. So if you like our channel, and if you like the content that we are providing, and if you like to encourage us, please subscribe us, and you can click the notification bell icon there, so then you will get the notification as soon as we upload a new video. So we are also doing these VATSIM real flights as well. So during those flights also we discuss certain system, what you call this, certain system related information of the A320 aircraft, and I hope that you will find some valuable information there as well. So you can, in the internet you will have in the YouTube you have lot of videos which shows you how to fly the aircraft, what to check for, and how to do the ILS approaches, so and so forth, and you can learn how to fly the A320 by watching those YouTube videos. But I haven't come across any videos which gives you the deep theoretical knowledge, or the depth of the systems through the simulations or whatever sources available. So my aim is to give you some in-depth knowledge of A320 aircraft systems, and I hope that you will find it interesting. And if you just a simple reminder again, so if you like the channel and if you like the content, please subscribe us. So until we meet next time, stay safe and fly safe. Thank you for watching on behalf of the Hangar channel.